concerns that the misinformation that we believe is in the memorial, and it made sense to us as Democrats to tell the whole story. And so we thought about which three people could talk about what's gone on in the past, what's happening now, and how we have to look at this issue in the larger context. So we're pleased to have three panelists. And I will introduce each individually as we go, okay? So our first panelist, I want to make sure I get everything just right here. Is Tracy Casselman. He's a retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee, worked 27 years with the National Refuges, and his last 11 years was spent supervising the complex for Southeast Idaho. That includes Camas, Deer Flat, Grace Lake, Minidoka, and the Bear Lake, right? And you're going to go through the history of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuge system. He has a degree in environmental science from the State of New York College of Forestry, and then a BS, that's a BS in forest biology, plus a MS in wildlife management from LSU. That was in 1989. So he's retired, lives in Pocatello, and I'm just very pleased to have him give us the background about why a federal refuge is so important to maintain in our state.
Thank you, Jan. So, as was stated, I've been, is that working? As was stated, I've been retired for 4 years. This is the first presentation I've done in 4 years.
Closer to your mouth.
Thank God my daughter just finished a master's degree and spent 2 hours cleaning up this presentation so you can actually see what's here. Anyway, to give a little background on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, why it was created, and then I'll go into the refuges of Southeast Idaho, and then we'll talk a little bit about Camas. But this is just a real quick overview. It certainly is not an in-depth history. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was created in 1903 with the establishment of Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge. Now, you have to understand the context of what was happening in 1903, or what had happened prior to 1903. Okay, we were coming out of the 1800s, which was a time of vast exploitation of wildlife resources in the United States. We had taken a bison population from an estimate of 30 to 60 million down to 1,000 individuals. Okay, so Pelican Island is a small island just off of Vero Beach, if anybody's familiar with the east coast of Florida. And at the time, there was a man named Paul Craigle, and he was, let me back up a little bit. So Fish and Wildlife Service has a wildlife first mandate. When you talk about the other agencies, everybody has a mandate. Forest Service is sustainable public use or sustainable use. BLM covers mineral rights and other things, so they have a very broad use. National Park Service, their mission is to preserve scenic and historic sites, so they have a preservation mandate. Fish and Wildlife Service's mandate is wildlife first. Currently, they're putting on what literature you read between 570 and 588 national wildlife refuges. Part of that is because some of them are called waterfowl production areas, which are slightly different, have slightly different regulations. They're spread throughout the country. You'll notice clusters of them in various places. Let's try that. Up here in the Prairie Pothole region, down along the coast, the Mississippi Flyway, they are primarily focused on wetlands and waterfowl. You know, the Fish and Wildlife Services manages habitat for wildlife. It doesn't really focus on individual animals per se, with the exception of endangered species like the condor reintroduction programs. But the National Wildlife Refuge System is a habitat management, a land management agency. That's what they do. So Pelican Island, this is a very small island, like I said, off of Vero Beach. That's Paul Craigle, a small man, stood about 5'2", as a lot of men did back in that time. He would spend his day paddling his boat up and down the Indian River and chasing off the market hunters. What were the market hunters after? Well, they would go to those islands, which were colonial nesting bird sites, in this case, pelicans. The picture you see is actually, you see in the previous picture, is actually a brown pelican in juvenile stage and not very healthy, as you might guess. And if you look here, you could see there's open spaces on that island, which the ground nesters are, and then the tall wading birds nest in the trees. So that was what was happening at the time, okay? This is what they were primarily after. In 1886, it was said that the feather plumes that you see here on these birds were worth twice their weight in gold. Why? Ladies' fashions. The more money you had, the more money you could spend on bigger feathers, more plumes, more adornment in your hats. Okay, and that was the fashion. You know, there's pictures of politicians' wives wearing those hats. There's pictures of, you know, the royalty in Europe wearing those hats. Easter parades in Atlantic City. That was the thing of the day. So literally, what they would do would be go out those islands at night and just grab the adults, kill them, take them back, pull the feathers, dump the birds, and they basically became crab food. And that was the way we treated our wildlife at the end of the 1800s into the early 1900s. That's why the National Wildlife Refuge System was created, and that's why other federal agencies, you know, came about, because the state laws at the time just weren't adequate enough to protect the resources, and they could see the resources dwindling. Oh, not sure what happened here. One too many. So again, in addition to rookeries, it was just a time of overexploitation. There were very few Fish and Wildlife Service regulations as far as harvest. Can that light be turned off? Just one here. Just the first one. There you go. So you can see the elk, and that is not, you know, that is not the annual collection that goes on at the elk refuge. You'll notice that all those antlers are attached to skulls. Okay, and that's quite a nice haul for a day of fishing. Punt guns. How many people know what a punt gun is? So these were guns that were mounted in a boat. They could shoot up to 5 pounds a shot at a time. Quite often it was just nails or whatever else they could find. They would go out at night and slowly paddle up or row up to the rafts of waterfowl and let one of those bad boys loose, send their dogs out and fill the barrels up, and they would all go to the big markets. A lot of this happened on the East Coast. It happened on the West Coast as well. But all these ducks were shipped to, you know, the big restaurants in Philadelphia, New York, Sacramento, places like that. And if you want to count those, note that every one of those that you see up there is a pair. Okay. So then came the Dust Bowl in the 30s and 40s. Okay. We had a few refuges established prior to that, but the Dust Bowl is what really pushed the creation and gave the refuge system the impetus. There was a wildlife chief named J. Clark Sally who you know, wore out several vehicles driving around the country establishing national wildlife refuges. And Camas was one of those. Camas was established in 1937 as part of the New Deal. It is a Dust Bowl, what we refer to as a Dust Bowl era refuge. So in Idaho, we're fortunate enough to have 6 national wildlife refuges. Kootenai way up north. Whoop, wrong button here. Let's see here. Yeah, I just pushed the wrong button and held it too long. Like I said, I've been retired for 4 years. Okay. Kootenai way up north is a waterfowl refuge. Deer Flat is, again, a waterfowl refuge. It is in Nampa, it's the other side of Boise. And in the Southeast Idaho National Wildlife Refuge Complex, which I was very fortunate enough to supervise for 11 years, consists of Camas, Grays Lake, Bear Lake, and Minidoka. So Minidoka is an interesting one. It was created in 1909 by Theodore Roosevelt as an overlay on Bureau of Reclamation's Lake Walcott. It's kind of amazing when you think about today. Today we have to have EAs and reams of paper. I've seen the document that Roosevelt signed, and it is about that one paragraph about that long, and it created 7 national wildlife refuges. Deer Flat and Minidoka were 2 of those. So as you can see here, it is on Lake Walcott. The BOR manages the water for irrigation and hydroelectric, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has management authority over the surface water and the land. So the Lake Walcott was created by damming up the Snake River. By damming up here at Minidoka, floods back up about 12 miles. Lake Walcott, this portion is open for public recreation and boating year-round. From this point on back, it is closed to boating for wildlife, with the exception of 2 very small open areas here that are boating lanes that people can fish. It's a very popular area for bass fishing. And unfortunately, it's also now become known as the carp refuge, which is, you know. If you go to Minidoka, there's not a wildlife tour route like you see at Camas or a lot of refuges, but it is well known for its nesting population of grebes, both Clarks and Westerns. It has the state's largest pelican colony, much to the chagrin of a lot of fishermen. You can see pronghorn there, and there's some pretty nice cottonwood galleries that you'll see nesting owls and grayhorn owls and great blue herons. The next refuge to be established was Gray's Lake in Wayne, Idaho. It is a 19,000-acre hardstem bulrush marsh, which is the largest hardstem bulrush marsh in the continent. So what does that mean? It means it's really good wildlife habitat. One of the reasons it was established is because it had the highest nesting density of sandhill cranes on the continent at the time. Very, very important. It's a great waterfowl refuge for a lot of other things. It does not have an auto tour route. It has a couple of overlooks. It's a great place to go in the spring when the cranes are there. It's just amazing to watch them dance. So again, it's known for its sandhill crane nesting. It now has a fairly robust population of nesting trumpeter swans. Historically, it was the first place the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service tried to reintroduce whooping cranes. There's a few folks here that are probably old enough to remember that. When I first got here 15 years ago, people would every once in a while, do you ever still see a whooping crane come through? The answer to that has been no, probably for the previous 5 years, and certainly for the last 15. I don't think there's been a whooping crane sighted in Idaho in probably 2 decades. As I mentioned here, it's a tremendous place for wildflowers. Interestingly enough, Camas does not have any Camas. Okay, it's named for Camas Creek. It's not named for the Camas wildflower. But that's what you got right there. If you go out there in June, you'll see Camas. In fact, it's a site that the show band commonly harvests Camas from. Then there's Bear Lake, which is a really interesting piece of property. It is probably the only National Wildlife Refuge in the West that could use less water. And why is that? Well, because it's a irrigation. It's a reservoir in a lot of ways for irrigation. Water is actually pumped from Bear Lake back up into it as a holding area. So they actually try to manage impoundments, and there are some impoundments. That's one place it doesn't dry up, one place you can go. It does have a fairly long wildlife drive that you can tour around. I think one of my favorite things to see there are the ibis. But you can see an abundance of waterfowl, cranes, moose, commonly sighted there as well. It was originally the channel you see through the center that's known as the Telluride Canal. So Camas, one that we're all here to learn more about, one that we care about, is an 11,000 acre oasis for waterbirds. It was established in 1937 by President Delano Roosevelt, an executive order under the New Deal. You can read here some of the quotes that were in that initial legislation. So, that's the namesake of Camas National Wildlife Refuge. Camas Creek runs through it. The refuge has one of the oldest water rights. To my understanding, there's only 3 water rights that are older. They're stock water rights that are upstream. In my time here, we worked extensively with Watermaster on calls. If the Watermaster said there wasn't enough water to reach the refuge, we didn't ask for it. We told them to give it to somebody upstream. Okay. Downstream water users have always asked for us to clear the channel. When I got there, they were running a root rake on the back of a D4, which I believe was a D4. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, down through the channel. We allowed him the time to run a brush hog to remove the willows. The concern is removing the willows. We have, at the refuge, they have blueprints from 1937 that show the depth of Camas Creek to be about 3 feet. Any one of you here could stand on the shoulders of just about any other of you and not be able to see out of a lot of the bottom now. Over the years, that creek has been heavily incised. That coupled with all the pivot development around has heavily impacted the water availability, water coming down the creek. Water doesn't overflow the banks as it historically did. This is a wetland. You can look at that and see that. The values that Camas has for the public is an extensive network of roads that you can see going around the ponds. It's a great place to watch wildlife. If you get on the website, you'll see there's some awesome photographs. A lot of these photographs that I'm using were taken there. It gets about 20,000 visitors a year. It, in the past, has been managed using wells to put water in the impoundments early in the season for waterfowl migrating northward. It's not much of a fall migration stop. There's usually not enough water there. So in the spring, the water's been put on through the wells and gives birds a stopover on their northward migration. A particular note is, in my mind, has always been when the snow geese come through. So here's some of the iconic species you'll see there, things that it's known for. Certainly trumpeter swan at the top. There is a cottonwood gallery that I personally have counted up to 27 bald eagles come in one evening. Wildlife can be seen. It's got a pretty good elk herd that hides out down in Sandhole Lake during the fall hunting season. And this little guy here, who can tell me what this little guy is?
Wilson's Wormwood.
Right, so Wilson. I figured there were a few people here who do that. And, Camas, in Idaho birding, Camas has more rare bird sightings than any other place in the state. And Wilson's warbler was one of the species that was found 20 years ago to be in much higher abundance in one location than they thought were in the entire state. Now that survey has been redone, and I'm not sure of the results of the follow-up survey. So, what will you lose if this is no longer a national wildlife refuge? If it becomes a state wildlife management area?
Everything.
Well, couple things. Let's talk about a few things that are different, and a few things that are different in the way those areas are managed. National wildlife refuges are managed for the benefit of the American people. Okay, they're managed with your tax dollars. Okay, most WMAs are managed for the benefit of the hunting public with hunting dollars. Okay, with license fees. Okay, Idaho Fish and Game is not any different than any other agency that gets most of their revenue from hunting fees. They have to cater to the hunter, because that's who pays the bills, and that's understandable. I'm a hunter. I hunt at Camas. Okay, I don't mind paying that bill, but that's the thing you lose, and part of that is what you don't see on wildlife management areas that you'll see on federal property are public use facilities. You don't see an auto tour route like you see at Camas on most wildlife management areas. And the reason that these federal places were established back at the turn of the century was because the federal politicians at the time and the people of influence, like Aldo Leopold, Gifford Pinchot, John Muir, they recognized that there were some special places out there. And they were so special that they shouldn't be subject to the political whims of local governments. That's why these places were set aside. Okay? If the state takes over Camas, they don't have the money for public use. When I get done with this, I will go home and I will start working for the Friends of Edson Fitzer Nature Area. Why? Because it is a state managed area that has no funding for the user group that's their primary audience. They get very, very little funding for public use. So they've recently established a friends group, of which I'm on the board, and I'll go home and do work for them tomorrow, because I got some deadlines that are due by tax day. So that's what you're going to lose. Anything that's associated with water, you will lose. The ability to drive down the auto tour route and see those birds and photograph those birds, enjoy those birds the way you do now, you're very likely to lose, because the fish and game will be subject to pressure from the local water users and the local politicians. Thank you.
Now, I would like to take clarifying questions, but any questions that have a policy implication, I would like to hold so all of the three panelists could answer those questions. We'll leave time at the end for sure. So are there any clarifying questions for Tracy? Yes.
Could you explain maybe the impacts, hydrological impacts of the dredging that happened in the creek?
Can you explain the hydrological impacts from the dredging?
Sure, there are a couple of things that happen when you dredge in an area like that. So the stream was, if throughout, we've got survey data that says it was 3 feet. When Camas Creek rushed at 3 feet, it would spill over its banks, and it would flood that entire basin that is now, it's a much bigger basin than Camas. I mean, it's Camas, it's Mud Lake, it's all that area. That all used to be inundated. A lot of the ground that's now farmed was historically inundated, okay? So that doesn't happen anymore because you've cut down deep. The other thing is that stream at one time probably had a fairly decent silt layer, which would keep the water there and allow it to spread out, okay? As you constantly cut down into the gravels, you don't have that silt layer, okay? Willow will help slow that down and help build that back up. Any obstructions will help build that back up, but it does impact the downstream water users. The other thing that it does is because it's so deep and because of the nature of the soil there, the gravel, it actually sucks the water out of the impoundments and the wetlands that the Fish and Wildlife Service puts water in. So it's twofold. Cutting down that deep makes the water run really fast into the channel, far down. Doesn't allow it to overflow as it historically did and recharge those wetlands. And it also subs all the water out of those wetlands. So, go ahead.
Does the Army Corps of Engineers have any authority or action with the?
Yes. To dredge that channel, you would need to apply for a 404 permit.
Correct.
Okay? And that's a federal permit, and the landowner has to sign off on it.
Whether it's state or federal.
Yeah, the landowner has to sign off on it. So, in the past, we've been hesitant to do that because we worked with water resources, we worked with a water master, and it's like, let's not do that because we know it's just going to go keep deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions if you don't mind. The first is, I think you told us that this was established in 1937.
Correct.
If we, I certainly wasn't around then, but I can imagine that, the landscape was a lot different. I mean, I don't know how much of that area around the refuge was farmed, maybe none of it, but, there's a lot more open space, a lot more natural space at that time, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So why was it that Camas was singled out of all the other places that they could have decided to make a refuge? What made it special in 1937?
At the time, somebody correct me if I get my number wrong, but at the time that refuge was built, it was predicated on artesian wells. It had 8 large artesian wells. All these impoundments and where they're placed and how they're aligned was based on water that just free flowed out of the ground. Now, why did that occur? At the time, I don't think they fully understood it. But there's, and this, I'm going to get this a little off, and most people won't be able to follow it. It's pretty technical. But they were taking water from a different basin, transferring it over what's called the Aegean Bench. And back in 1937, there were no pivots. This is all flood irrigation. So, when water was put out on the landscape and out on the ground, it was all through canals and flood irrigation that passed through. The other thing is you didn't have all the pivots and all the wells sucking the groundwater out. So there's a lot that's changed. I mean, we've got photographs that actually show from 1937, 1954 to 2000 that just show the change in the landscape. And as you're right, a lot of it is agriculture. And when they went away from pivot irrigation, or went away from flood irrigation to pivot irrigation, we don't have that water that used to be flood irrigated up above the refuge would sink down and come in. Now it doesn't, because we're using our water way more efficiently.
Okay, so the second question, if I may, you suggested that if this were to transfer to a state-managed wildlife management area, that I thought I heard you say that the water would be gone. So I take it that there's and others will know a lot more about this than me. So these artesian wells that you say with all the groundwater pumping and what, they've gone dry, is that true?
Yep.
So the only way you can get water into the wetlands is through Camas Creek?
No, Camas also has a number of wells,
Okay.
as do the downstream users. The downstream users get Camas Creek water and they have wells. The challenge is in the last few years is there's been a water call by the folks down in Hagerman who have senior water rights. And for the last couple of years, we haven't gotten any water up here.
For the groundwater.
For the any groundwater rights.
So my last part of this was, is this somehow wrapped up or part of this negotiated agreement that we hear about from last year or maybe the year before between the water users down in the Twin Falls, Magic Valley area, and and is the recharge that's supposed to happen up here, is this part of that?
I believe so, and I'm not, again, I've been retired for 4 years, so I'm not up on the technicalities, but the downstream water users have senior rights. So there's been a negotiation, when they want water, we don't get it up here. But I'm not familiar with the specifics of that, and I can't speak to that.
Well, what was the senior water right up there?
I have those dates. Can I just share it with them? I talked to the Department of Water Resources yesterday. There's a total amount of 600 cubic feet per second is their diversion right. These are all wildlife beneficial use rights, okay? They go back to 1883, 84, 85, 87, 95, then 1902, 1903, 1909, 1911. And the Mud Lake users are junior to most of those because the earliest is 1910 and 1969 and 1997. So then you add all the groundwater, wells as well. They have groundwater rights as well.
When are those?
He did not have the dates handy on those. I just have the surface water ones for Camas Creek, okay? But I think everyone knows that in most cases, when land is sold, the water rights go with the land. And that is the concern here, I think, in general, whether we want to get into the details of recharge and everything else, but the hydrology has changed. I don't think there's any question about that changing from 1883 on. But anyway, the concern is, of course, that these are wildlife beneficial uses, that you can change the use of the water. I mean, a change in beneficial use is certainly something the state could achieve if they wished. So I'm going to transition now to today.
I just wanted to add something real quick. I used to serve on the board for Camas years ago, and what I understood back then was two of the things were not only were surrounding farms depleting some of the water resources under the well water.
Can we get the mic so that people in the back can hear
Yeah.
what we're making comments?
Years ago, I served on the Camas board, and what I understood back then was that the water table underneath was being depleted a little bit by surrounding.
You got to go.
Closer, is that better? Okay. The water was depleted. I'll swallow it. The water resources in the table were being depleted by surrounding farmland, and the state and the feds would not allow Camas to get additional funds to dig deeper, to drill deeper wells to get resources of water. So they were greatly dependent on this struggle of water as everybody in Idaho has. And then the original reason, if I understood when you were trying to explain this, ma'am, with the artesian waters that were there, it put it on, one of its primary things was for migratory birds to have a place to drop off, and that's where Mud Lake and Market Lake came in later. But Camas was set up because there was such a plentiful for like the white-faced ibis and stuff like that to come in, and they needed that pooled water that they could migrate there and move on down the road, and cranes and stuff as well. But it wasn't just that the water was there, but it served a purpose to be migratory.
They chose that site because of the water.
Yeah.
And I do want to speak to one thing real quick, again.
And I'm going to grab the mic after you.
So I do want to point out that at the end of President Trump's last term, Camas was awarded a significant amount of money to realign its water delivery system and to re-drill some of its wells. Again, this refuge was set up in 1937, predicated on artesian wells that just, welled up. So everything was built that way. But once we lost those and we had to pump, the water wasn't being used efficiently. So they're still funding, and they're still in the middle of a process of improving the delivery system of that water. And that included moving some wells and drilling them deeper.
real quick, you said that was a significant amount of funding. Roughly, how much has the federal government spent at Camas over the course of its existence? Versus what the state utilized?
I have no clue. I couldn't even guess that. From 1937 till now,
Adjusted for inflation?
millions and millions, I'm sure. I mean, you figure, staff and, at one time that refuge had 5 or 6 staff, all the work. I mean, there's times I can remember signing an acquisition request for $10,000, $20,000 worth of gravel every couple of years, for that auto tour route. I don't know. Does anybody know what the funding was for the,
I'm pretty sure that grant that helped redo the water structures of that whole big project was about $7 million.
yeah, that was my memory, yeah.
7 million.
Yeah.
7.8.
So
Yeah.
the next speaker may have some
There you go.
answers. So if we go to the next speaker, thank you. I wanted to make sure if people had clarifying questions, but some of these, more of talk about hydrology, we can wait until the last half hour, hopefully. So Zoe Jorgensen is a retired educator. She got her degree in educational psychology from Brigham Young University and taught 35 years for Idaho Falls School District 91. So Zoe received the Governor's and Industry Award for Notable Teaching of Science, which is a National Science Teachers Association Award for Science and Technology. And she was a state-level nominee for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science teaching twice. Twice, it says. Good. She joined the Board of Friends of Camas in June of 2016. She retired in 2018. But can I read your quotes for your bio? I think they're lovely. I believe the more we work together, the more we can do for children. But as a member of the board, she's already helped write a grant to acquire a variety of materials to give students visiting the refuge a hands-on learning experience. She also started outreach visits, taking educational presentations to schools and other community organizations. She strongly believes society needs to actively engage in their environments, and we need to start this interaction at an early age. So welcome, and we're going to hear now what Friends of Camas is doing and their concerns.
Please note the bio. I'm a teacher, not a hydrologist. I probably can't answer any of your water stuff, but I can tell you what Camas is happening at Camas and what we're doing out there. Okay, so Camas, our wildlife refuge, is a habitat for, started with about 300 different species, and it, for a lot of migratory birds, non-migratory animals, not just birds. We've got all kinds of animals out there, and they depend on our refuge for its habitat, including our beloved sage-grouse. Lots of different animals that we have, and my pictures are courtesy of different people with Friends of Camas that have sent them in, and I've borrowed all of their pictures as they send them to us to put on our website. Lots of different species out there. So we, our board, our Friends of Camas was established in 2014. There was a couple of years of sputtering, but we finally became official in 2014. And it is a nonprofit organization, and our goals are to support the refuge. We want to preserve and protect and restore the biological diversity, the historical resources of the refuge landscape, and provide opportunities for outdoor recreation, education, interpretation, and science research. So we have been doing a lot of that, especially the outdoor education. We've started with lots of field trips. Kids come out to the refuge. We have activities for them to do, engage in different scientific activities. We've actually got 4 of them, and the people from Camas don't know the 4th one yet. We're just, another field trip is getting planned just this spring. Our scientific research, we just finished 2 years worth of a bird counting process, bird banding and bird counting that is supported by one that was done in 2007. And so we're taking a long-term look at the different varieties of birds that are out on the refuge. We've also supported a couple programs. One was help getting electronic devices so that we can track the migration of geese and, I better ask, swans is one of them, isn't it? Okay, swans, okay. Like I said, I only became the board chair in January, so we're still learning a whole lot of background. So we've got, we're tracking. We've watched birds fly from Bear Lake up to us, to Grays Lake and on to Canada. We're definitely monitoring that. So there's a lot of different things that are going on out there at the refuge. It's not just a hunk of land that might get 1 or 2 visitors at a time. So we do have a lot of the different picture from our bird banding. We have the pollinator garden going on. One of the big pushes are native species. So they are working on getting rid of some non-native species of plant life that we're working for native species, including a huge chunk of milkweed for migrating monarchs. So there's a lot of environmental control, a lot of environmental science going on, and we're monitoring a lot of things that are going on out there. Friends of Camas, oops, went too far, I think I had one more. Okay, we had, there's a lot of community outreach. Friends of Camas is involved in about 6 activities. Tracy mentioned the eagles. In February, we have Come to Roost. We have people, they come and watch at sunset. We watch all of these eagles come to roost. We provide the hot cocoa and chocolate and cookies, but great experience for that. Coming up in May, we've got, we participate in the Migratory Bird Day. This year it's hosted at Market Lake. We host every other year. We do serve lunch, but we have all kinds of fun activities. We had a local falconer come and show peregrine. We have activities for kids. We participate in the zoo's Earth Day. The birds were flying into the windows at the Camas, so our volunteers went and put screens, a screen overlay on the windows, so the birds will quit trying to fly through the office. And so we've got that. So there's lots of things that are happening. In the fall, we have Birds Bugle brunch. Haven't heard any bugling yet, but we have a great brunch, hay rides, we visit. We've got a walk for the refuges in October that we've started. We've also had, oh, I know what just came in and out. We were a major site for the eclipse. I know some of you forgot the eclipse, but we had thousands of people that were able to use the refuge to be able to watch the eclipse with us. So we've been working on it, we've been doing all kinds of things, and unbeknownst to us, we had the Senate Memorial go through. We had not had any word about it until it came through the news. One quote that was in the Post-Register just recently, that it was meant to be a shot over the bow, which means it's a warning of things to come. So that's why we we're here to respond to some of the things that were in that shot over the bow and make sure that we are all on the same page. Find out what the communication is, find out what's going on and where the concerns are. So our response, we did post a response, friendsofcamas.org. We do have our response posted there. Some of the things that we wanted to make sure were there. We do believe Friends of Camas believes that there was an oversimplification of some of the issues and a few misrepresentations of some of the data and especially some of the math that was there. And Tracy cleared up some of it. There's still some more there. One analogy that our previous board person said that if you took the measurements of the part of that memorial, the Camas would be underwater. If you did all the water that it said flowed through there, we would be under 4 foot of water. Okay.
Can I just say something? I just looked at my notes. It's 60 CFS. It is not 600. That would be underwater. Sorry.
I was going to mention my
Thank you.
60 here.
Thank you. I want to correct myself before
Okay.
you did. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the things that were in that are people that have some history and some more knowledge about water than I do, had some differing opinions on the way the hydrology issues were laid out in the memorial. We also talked to one of our board members that works with water flow and water rights here in Idaho, and technically the willows and the sediment and the different dirt in the stream is technically not an injury to water rights. So yes, it might help it flow a little bit better, but we are not an injury-causing party. Camas is not causing legal injuries. They may not be totally being cooperative or whatever you want to say, but it is not causing the injuries to water rights. Oh, my button's as sensitive as yours was. Okay, so one of the things that even if there is a transfer to Idaho management, it would require the permission of the Army Corps of Engineers, the question that was there earlier. Nothing can be changed on that creek without the 404 permission, and again, that goes back to the landowner and would have to go through their inspection, their work, their information to get any of that kind of work done. It's not just transfer to Idaho and then Idaho gets to make all of those decisions. Okay. The one thing that really came to mind was the communication and cooperation part. According to our previous chairperson, there was an agreement and talk between the water users at Mud Lake and Camas Creek, and if there was something that needed to be done or worked on, that was done, in his words, under a handshake agreement. There has been no communication with any of the staff at Camas Creek that this was a problem. Last year, this year, 2 years ago, there has not been any local communication or talking to them. There was no one that came to the Friends of Camas. Now, we are not in charge of anything on there except supporting and helping out when we can. But there was nothing that came through us either until we read it in the news. So communication would be the best way to resolve some of these issues. Talk to each other, work with each other, and go through some of those issues together. The main thing that we came up with as the Friends of Camas, a supportive group, funding for the refuge system. Now, I know the memorial mentioned something about management. Yes, 2 years ago, the previous manager had a fabulous opportunity to be able to expand his repertoire and went to Alaska for a couple of years. And because of the current environment, say this nicely, we don't have a manager. We have a half-time manager, and she's fabulous. She's responsive. She does what she can. She's also part-time manager at Grays Lake. So she has to split her time between the two managements. And so we don't have as quick to response if there was a communication to the complex. So Grays Lake, Minidoka, Bear Lake, and Camas are overseen by a complex, and the manager of the complex had no news of this either. And so she didn't know it was coming down. So she couldn't communicate that to our part-time manager, who could communicate that to the staff. So there again, better funding for our refuge system, including personnel. We have recently lost our maintenance person through the early attrition, early retirement offer. So right now, instead of 4 or 5 people out at Camas, we have 1. We love her. So we need to think about the whole ramifications of the shifting issues that are going on now, especially with funding for our wildlife services. Major communications with our local legislative delegations, with our state level, federal level. That open communication, open talking are the main things that would really help to work through these issues, instead of just using a hammer to get through what is perceived as been an issue that could have been taken care of with some communication and talking. And I know the Twin Falls issue kind of backed up, and we had to shut down our pumps for about a short time. I don't know how long, but they were shut down this summer. We followed the rules on the pumps, and we did not pump. Camas have had several years of drought. There's not as much water coming through, and we don't have, the ponds haven't filled up, the different issues there. So we're not taking all the water just to relieve our situation. Camas goes with the flow of everybody else along the creek. We do have water rights that is about 60. Not 600. I was wondering if I messed up on the zero. I thought it was
I did that.
And I do know that is very, very closely monitored. It is very much taken into account as we go through using the water that has been allotted to us. Okay. Now, it was mentioned that we had a fabulous grant that helped us address this. So in 22, we received a $7.8 million project, the Great American Outdoor Act, through the program of the America Beautiful program. And its major goal was to mitigate wildlife management costs by improving the ability to deliver the water to the best of its usage and cost. And so this is one thing that we took on with great expectations. One of the things that might play into some of the issues now is that it did start in 22, but it didn't wrap up in 24. We are still working on it. There's still some parts of the project, and so some of that differences in Camas Creek and some of the water issues may even be resolved by the time we finish this up and go forward with that. And so the main goal of that project was to relocate 3 of the wells, and they went to the most productive area for wildlife. And so instead of expending water where it's not as productive, they were assessed, closed down, moved, and redrilled with 3 of the wells on the refuge. There was a replacement and the rehabilitated of 3 miles of the open water delivery ditches. They were all lined, and so there wasn't as much percolation. The Camas is very sandy and a lot of loam, so the water just goes right through. And so all of the delivery ditches beyond Camas Creek, where we're taking the water to where it needs to be, has been much, it's all been lined. We don't lose as much water, so as much water efficiency, so we only use what we need or less. They had an additional Camas Creek diversion structure, which improves the wetlands within the water flow hunting area and improve the riparian habitat. So they've actually put in a process that the water actually goes to where it's supposed to and then flows out at the way it's supposed to. So the diversion structure, and I'm not sure if that is up and running yet. Can I look at Andrea? Yes, no? Is that this year? Next year? What? Okay. Oh. And so Brian Weehausen, our previous manager, made the statement that this project makes us the good neighbor. We're trying to do what is being asked of us. We will be able to accumulate more water in the priority wetland basins by eliminating the water loss in our delivery ditches. And so this project actually is helping out with those issues that we've had. As I became the board chair in January, I did find out that there's several national programs that help support the wildlife refuges, the National Wildlife Refuge Association, and CORFA, the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates. And so they are helping at a national level with some of the same issues that are going on that we have through the process. One of the things that they pointed out, and there is a handout that's got the next 3 graphs on it that you're welcome to take with you. Of all the national properties that are managed, so of course the state parks are in the billions in their budgets. National parks, yeah, sorry. The national parks, 4.7 billion budget for about 35 million acres. Okay, so we also have the Forest Service, and we've got billions in budget for 193 million acres. Our BLM, we're in the billions for the budget for 245 million acres. And our wildlife refuges, we have 542 million. It's not a B, it's an M. But we have 760 million acres of submerged, and that was new to me. I did not know that we had submerged wildlife refuges. We do have some out there. We also have 96 million terrestrial acres. And at the time that this was given, we still had about 2,353 FTE working in our refuges. Okay, so then they told us that even though the workforce is going down, the number of visits are going up. We're using our lands. We're using those public lands more and more, especially the refuges. And so overall, we are getting more people, and we have less people working there. And finally, just the budget alone. We took a dip in 13-14, and then we're coming back up. And if they were to fund next year, even at 2010's budget, we would be close to over $7 million would be needed to fund, and it's not there. Our projection,
700,000.
yeah, 700,000. Sorry. Yeah, we got a picture in the road. Sorry. Okay, so it's looking at, it might stay the same, maybe, but if we could have it back, even at this level, it'd take that much in today's money to get us to fund. So nationally, we do need to. In talking with Desiree from the National Refuge Association, she is telling us that right now that approximately 20% of the staff, refuge staffs have been lost since January. And so nationally, I know, like I mentioned, we've lost several. And I know we've lost a couple, but several of them have been from just not hiring new. Okay, the projections with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a 40% reduction in staff. So even if we change this to Fish and Wildlife, and I know we're talking Idaho Fish and Wildlife, not necessarily national, but it's a trickle-down effect, they're getting cut back. So there's a lot of reduction going there also. And there's a possibility of offices. Now, we do not, our office is just basically an office. It's got a couple desks and a couple wonderful people there. There are refuges that are big enough that they have visitor centers, they have gift stores, those kind of things. But those are closing down. The leases are going away. A lot of the offices, there won't be an office to go work at. And so through the national information, there's a lot of reduction going on nationally. So some of the things that we can do is, we all go, I can't say we all, I go out, enjoy the wildlife service, and I can't necessarily say that I tell anybody, oh yeah, I was at the refuge today, or I don't tell my legislators, oh yeah, I used it for 6.5 hours, or whatever, but we're using it. So we need to, and we care about it. So we need to let our congressmen and our legislative people know that we are interested in keeping our public lands public. We want to make sure that they stay there. One thing that has not been mentioned that needs to be addressed also with 104 is tribal rights. If it goes to the state, tribal rights are gone. As long as it stays part of the national nexus, then the tribal, different tribes, including our Shoshone-Bannock, do retain their tribal rights. They might come up to Camas for ceremonies or hunting or fishing, whatever, but if they are under state management, those tribal rights are gone once it leaves the national nexus. And so we need to make sure that we want to talk about this issue, make sure that they understand you know, how important these federal lands are to us. Now, we did talk to Congressman Simpson. We were on a telecommunication Zoom call with his staff. We didn't get to talk to him, but we talked to his staff. But as of the 10th, we have some news, and I want to play that clip really quick. Yeah, usually what happens is once you go to this picture, the picture in the Zoom or in this doesn't change, so we have to slideshow them. So, Boise News.
Can you make it? How much should you walk?
I know. Oh, come on. I don't want to go any faster. Just give me the screen back.
Can you hit this
I'm
down
gonna
at the
do
bottom?
the slow. For some reason, my whole. Yeah, I was gonna say my whole browser is frozen. Okay, there we go. Go ahead. Let's close that one. Go to this one.
I just unplug it.
Okay, so now I think we're finally sliding, and we can do it and extend it. There we go.
They have measles. I don't know if we're
There.
Are remembered. They test your limits
Skip the
and push you to
One of Idaho's congressional
congressional representatives has signed onto a bill in D.C. that would prevent the sell-off of most public lands. Our Dude Binkley joins us to break down the bill and explain why some groups say it would be a win for one of the gems of the gem state. Dude?
Hunter, with public lands making up about 63% of Idaho, supporters say this bill helps ensure treasured spaces remain accessible for generations to come. From mountain trails to pristine rivers, Idaho's identity is woven into its vast public landscapes.
When we look at the West, it's kind of a uniting factor for everyone.
To prevent the sell-off of those lands, U.S. Representative Mike Simpson signed onto the Public Lands and Public Hands Act that would limit the sale or transfer of most public lands by the Department of the Interior and Forest Service. Any public land that would be sold under the bill's exceptions would require congressional approval.
Across the state, this is something that everyone cares about. It's something that everyone values.
Conservation Voters for Idaho Program Director Ryan McGoldrick says about 63% of Idaho is made up of public lands, and a bill like this would help make sure those lands are protected and passed down to future generations.
We're really thankful that Representative Simpson listened to his constituents. We know that he cares about public lands. He's been a leader on issues like protecting salmon populations, protecting our public lands, and he really listened to voters on this issue.
In a statement about the bill, Representative Simpson said in part, public lands were set aside for public use, and we have a responsibility to ensure that future generations will be able to enjoy the same benefits we sometimes take for granted today. As a lifelong Idahoan and chairman of the House Interior and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, I have worked long and hard to protect Idahoans' way of life by preserving access to Idaho's public lands, while ensuring the federal land management agencies are good neighbors.
I think at a time when we're seeing a lot of political division throughout the country, public lands and that kind of access to outdoors is one of those things that can bring us all together. And so it's critical at a time like this that we, come together and support this thing we all love.
Outside of being a place to recreate that many Idahoans enjoy, those lands also play a large role in the state economy. The conservation voters say public lands generate $7.9 billion for Idaho's economy every year. And Hunter, this bill has received bipartisan support, also being sponsored by a Republican representative from Montana and a Democratic representative from New Mexico.
And we'll see how it plays out. Thank you, Dude.
Okay.
Some courses are played. Some are remembered.
There we go. We have one last slide. Yes. And we'll just wrap up real quick.
Great.
Okay.
Then we can turn the lights on after
Yep.
that.
So basically, the information that I bring from Friends of Camas is that we do support our public lands and we do support what's going on at Camas, and we would like to work out the differences and do a lot of communication and help the staff there do some outreach, whatever needs to happen, because we do need our public lands and they are being used, and Camas is way used. We use it a lot for different activities, and so just from a support point of view, Friends of Camas is in there with a voice to say, keep our public lands public.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I want to make sure that Rocky gets his time too, so I'm going to ask to hold questions then until we go till 5:30, and I think the music may have stopped. No? All right. Let me give Rocky's introduction. Rocky Barker is Dan Barker's dad. Did you all know that? All right. Oh, but he's also an award-winning journalist and an author. He wrote the book called Scorched Earth, How the Fires of Yellowstone Changed America. That was the inspiration, I didn't know that, for the TV movie Firestorm, The Last Stand in Yellowstone. He is a former environmental reporter for the Idaho Statesman, but many of us know him when he was here. And you didn't put in here how many years you're at the Post-Register. How many years? 11 years at the Post-Register. Now, you may not know that he was part of a team of reporters chosen as finalists for the Pulitzer Prize. Pulitzer? Is that how you say that?
Yes.
In 2007. Pulitzer, sorry. He helped write a series on the Columbia River, salmon, and energy. He also was the primary researcher for a series of editorials calling for the breaching of the 4 Snake River dams to save the salmon. That team was the first winners of the Dolly Connolly Environmental Journalism Award in 1998. The National Wildlife Federation awarded Rocky with its National Conservation Achievement Award in 1999. In 2016, the Wilderness Society gave him its Aldo Leopold Award, and Trout Unlimited recognized him with its Communications Professional Award in 2018 for his work on Pacific salmon. Aren't you tired at this point? No?
Just getting started.
Good. Please welcome Rocky Barker back.
Thank you very much. And Jan, thanks for inviting me back to, this is the old hometown. I spent a lot of time here and really love Eastern Idaho. And, I'm here to talk kind of the big picture about public lands. I learned a lot today about the Camas Creek issue. I hunted Camas Creek back in the day and saw a moose there once. It's a beautiful area. Of course, I love Mud Lake too, and I love the whole area. And I think before I get into my talk about the big picture of public lands, I do have a bias here. I'm a journalist, so I, try to give people a little idea where I go. My main bias, though, is the best way we make decisions is to collaborate and for everybody to sit down, talk, and work their way through things. I watched it on the Hawaii's for wilderness that Mike Crapo did. I watched it on the Boulder White Clouds that Mike Simpson did. I've watched it on all kinds of local areas. I watched you do it on the Henry's Fork. So, I hope you folks, and I really admire the fact that the senator's here. That's good. That's how we get things done in the future, is working together and talking. But now we're in the middle of a really interesting time for public lands. I have covered it for 50 years. I've covered public lands all over the country, and I've covered many different times when people were arguing that they should take big chunks of our public lands and either transfer them to the state or sell them off. And there have been court cases, and of course, right now there's a court case in Utah that they'd like to resolve, and our own Attorney General Raul Labrador has said he'd like to join it. I must tell you, I'm not terribly worried about it. I don't think it's a very good court case, and I wouldn't be putting my name on it if I was trying to get public lands. But, that's for Raul and the other folks to make their decision to do. What is possible right now is in the, is this not working? Thank you. What is happening?
No, that one's not working.
It was working.
It was working.
How's this?
No.
That's too bad. I talk loud, and I bet that.
Just keep going.
So, bottom line is, Congress just in the last couple of weeks voted. They voted, should we take selling public lands off the table for this reconciliation in which Republicans can vote a big giant bill, as a big beautiful bill, as the president says, that does a whole lot of things, and there are a significant amount of people in the Republican Party who didn't want to have public lands. The idea of selling public lands to help offset the deficit, and they had a vote on it, and it was closer than they would have liked, but they won. And so that they didn't know they lost. And it's still an issue. It's in that reconciliation bill, which last week passed the House. All that does, though, it's a big outline for what they finally will do. Now they have to sit down and go through the details. And there are still very real opportunities for us as Americans to weigh in on this. And I've heard some pretty strong comments today from people who don't want to see public land sold. So there's also another push going on right now to sell public lands, and it's not about the budget issues, it's about housing. And I wrote a blog about this about 3 months ago, but this administration, President Trump's folks, have come up with their idea to help housing is to take public land around some of our urban areas and around gateway communities like, Jackson Hole or West Yellowstone, Driggs, and sell off some of the public land for housing. And it sounds like, oh my God, how would you do? It certainly isn't going to be low-cost housing, is it? What I wrote about in Boise was, I said, so are they talking about the foothills? The Boise foothills? I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. I do kind of, because what they're talking about actually was done by a Democrat. Harry Reid did this for years around Las Vegas. And his idea was they needed the housing for the growing Las Vegas community. Now, of course, that wasn't helping them with their water situation. And I'm worried about when they're going to come up here and try and take Idaho water. Make no mistake, President Trump, by the way, he had an answer to solve California's water problem. He said, just take it out of the faucet up north. And that faucet was the Columbia River. And what most people didn't understand, because they go, oh, that'll never happen, there's no faucet over there. Well, actually, if they wanted, we looked at this before in Idaho. We looked at it when they were looking at taking and pumping. They in those days pumped the water up to up from Bell Rapids in Hagerman, and they pumped it up there, and they did crops up on the plateau up there. So all they were going to do is just keep the same pumping, same kind. Obviously, lots more money, but that's okay. We can pay for the pumps and the pipes, and of course, water in the West travels uphill towards money. So the idea would be basically that they could take it over into Nevada by jackpot and up and over into California. That's what LA was trying to do 30 years ago when I was still here in Idaho Falls writing about it. And so when you hear people talk about that, oh, it can be done. But of course, that's our water. So I think we'd fight pretty hard for that. And that's kind of, those are the kind of things right now, this whole fight over water that's going on. I've always said that, I could resolve that really quickly if we could take out those 4 dams on the Snake River that we're pumping all our water down there to get the fish through those dams. If we took those dams out, then we could take the water back, and maybe we wouldn't have to fight over it. There'd be quite a bit left here. Anyway, watch for the bill. Watch for the reconciliation bill. Bruce Westerman is the main guy. He's a Californian. He's the main guy pushing the idea that we can cut the federal budget by selling off some public land. Well, you know what? It's a drop in the bucket. I think it would, but once he gets started, there are people who basically don't care about us. They don't care about the West. This isn't about, public lands is not just about recreation. public lands is about logging, it's about mining, it's about ranching. You know, this is about our lifestyle here. So when you think of public lands in the big picture, that's what we're talking about. But the kind of public land issues these guys have been talking about today, you know, they're important for us to try to resolve. I don't think the federal government's gonna jump into this fight. I do think the fact that Representative Simpson has expressed his interest, I would think that the Trump administration would have to go through him. Now, many of you might not be worrying, thinking Simpson's gonna be that strong. He hasn't been a guy, but I can tell you right now on public land issues, he is strong. And, you know, on the salmon issue, he stuck his neck way out. So don't think this guy won't stick his neck out when he thinks something's important. So that's kind of my big picture view of public lands right now. Pay attention. We really have to pay attention. The issues that she was talking about in the budgets, right now, basically, this comes from me from Idaho Governor's Office to people who work at NOAA, who work at the Bureau of Reclamation. Our federal agencies are chaos right now. It's chaos. Now, that is not about, you know, politics. It's, we've done all these cuts, and then we've got to run our agencies. So I don't know how many people they need, but I hope before this summer, when things start burning, they figure it out, because it could get really bad if the Forest Service doesn't have the people, or if the BLM doesn't have the people. I see that the BLM director just stepped down because apparently she had some bad things to say about the January 6th insurrection. How dare her? Yeah. But anyway, stay involved. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, I really don't think these are working.
No, they aren't.
Battery's down.
But it's something.
It's all on.
It's all on, so. Oh well. I was a rower, and so I have very good pulmonary capacity still. So let's do this. I would like to take questions. We can go till 5:30. I don't know if you guys can stay any longer, but there will be time to talk with our panelists as well afterwards. And please would you say your name too? Would you do that?
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I'm Colette Olson, and I just wanted to clarify because I got a little confused when you were talking about the reconciliation bill. So they voted to include sale of public lands in the reconciliation bill?
They voted to at least continue discussions on that.
Okay.
That's basically the way.
And they can figure out that if they would do away with tax cuts, that would help?
Maybe they'll have to, I think they're talking about that too.
So communicating with your congressional
That's
is
right.
in order.
Okay.
Right. Questions? Observations?
Well, does, do all of the systems of refuges in the state of Idaho, do they track out-of-state visitors? Do we know how many, because we're talking kind of public lands for Idahoans to use, but part of these public lands are for everybody in the country to use. Do we know how many outside
Non-residents, in other words,
are using our refuges?
Generally, no.
Okay.
The only way we can even get a glimpse of that is typically through visitor sign-in, you know, where we can see if somebody's from, you know, Montana or New York or, you know, Spain. You know, these refuges are visited by people from all around the world. I mean, you know, when we had the eclipse, at Camas, my daughter was in charge of driving around and keeping track of all the license plates. We had 26 different states and 4 provinces. And then we talked to people from 16 different countries.
There's a good example, and certainly, and that's just the federal refuges we're talking about here. Yes.
Jerry Jane, if I may, I'd like to say a few words about the public lands that involve quite a bit. People, politicians, and special interests have been trying to steal our public lands at least since 1947. It was the cattlemen then, pretty much. But I view this effort every time I hear about it as I grind my teeth. The public lands belong to all of us, and they never belong to the states. The states got a certain amount of land when they moved from a territory to a state. So this, back to the subject of the Camas Refuge and the SenateJoint Memorial 104, it's an ill-advised piece of legislation. It's just another attempt to get control of public lands, and I think it's a very bad piece of legislation, and I'm not proud of our legislature for doing it. I don't know about the dredging issue. I think dredging a stream is probably a bad idea. I think we've heard some of the effects there. But anyway, to echo what some of the people have said here, contact your legislators at the state level and the federal level. Let them know how you feel about public land, because it's just going to go on. There'll always be greedy people who want to grab the public land, and it's not theirs to grab.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
You make comments, Senator.
I've been called a lot of things here today, so I better comment. I'm the senator that brought the memorial. My name's Van Burtenshaw, and there was no.
Dan, would you mind standing here for the camera?
There was no sale.
Thank you.
Talked about selling any property, just a different management. And the condition that she talked about, that I'm sorry.
Her name's Zoe.
Zoe talked about is we lost the manager 2 years ago.
No, it was 1 year ago. Sorry, Zoe.
1 year ago, and then we're losing our whatever he is, the municipal manager there is taking early retirement. And considering the things that are happening today in the federal government, we don't see managers coming back to that. The second thing is the water that goes, and I have the measurements, and you've said that my measurements aren't correct, so I take them from USGS Geological Survey is the one that measures the water. The water is measured on the east side of I-15, and then it comes through. And as Zoe said, there's about 60 CFS that comes through there. Anything above that 60 CFS belongs to the Mud Lake water users, but not until it fills the refuge, Rays Lake. And then that water that comes through there belongs to the Mud Lake water users. So, this is what happens. In 2016, and this is a year where the water flows out of the Centennial Mountains, it's about 60 some miles down to where it hits the refuge. And then it goes through the refuge, and then there's about 5 miles on the other side of the refuge, and then it goes into Mud Lake. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yeah, I would guess. I don't know about 5 miles, but yeah.
Well, I have a map that will show.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing.
I have 20 of the maps here. Would you like to reference that?
I've got that one too.
Oh, good.
But I've got one in color that's a little easier to see.
Oh, I don't have color.
So that's Camas when it comes down to the refuge. And then there, you'll see right there, there's blue that's a river or whatever you want to call it into Mud Lake. There's 11,000 acres in Mud Lake, about 11,000 acres in the refuge. The Mud Lake Wildlife Management Area is run by the State of Idaho. So it seems natural that they could still run the refuge. Given what water we put in there, let me tell you how much that is. By the U.S. Wildlife, or the U.S. Geological Survey. So in 2000, this is a district water report from Greg Shinton. He's the water master of District 31. This is 9 years. In 2016, there was only 5,760 acre feet that went into the refuge. Nothing came out the other side to Mud Lake. In 2017, there was 33,166 acre feet that went into the refuge. 6,712 acre feet come out the other side. In 2018, 31,840 acre feet went into the refuge, and 7,638 acre feet came out into the Mud Lake area. In 19, there was 27,510 acre feet that went into the refuge, with 3,300 acre feet that came out the other side. In 2021, 15,915 acre feet went into the refuge and didn't come out the other side. In 2021, see that? That was 2020. This is 2021. There was only 534 acre feet that came into the refuge, and of course nothing came out. 2022, 1,252, nothing came out the other end. And here's the correct. This is the one that hurts. In 2023, 42,460 acre feet went into the refuge. 10,740 acre feet went into Mud Lake. In 2024, 14,140 acre feet went into the refuge, and nothing into Mud Lake. We don't want 1 ounce of refuge water. We don't want 1 ounce. But we want to be able to get the water that belongs to the Mud Lake water users to their reservoir where they pump out. You heard it said that we've cleaned that channel a number of times over the years. The last time was 1998. And it's filled up with willows, with cattails, and with debris. And so to get that water through there and get to the lake is pretty tough to do. Now, the 30,000 acre feet that was left in the refuge in 2023, we pumped out of the ground over by Mud Lake. So it's a heavy cost to us. So we don't want your water, but we do want our water. And Camas doesn't run year round. It's based on the snowpack up there and how it melts. If it's cold up there and it melts slow, it never makes it down. But if it melts fast, it comes fast. And it isn't our desire to damage anything. We don't want to take away any bird refuge. We're not trying to sell any property. We still want the animals there. We want them to be managed.
So,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm a little concerned. Okay. I don't
You
feel
take
like,
over.
well, I really don't feel like I want to, I would rather be a moderator here, okay?
Okay.
And I'll ask you if it's a question you can answer.
Okay.
Okay, can,
Sorry, we just have a hydrologist here who had something to say.
so, I mean, that's,
It's just a clarification.
come on over.
So I work for City of Pocatello, and I help administrate their stormwater permit through the EPA. And part of that is we have a bunch of stormwater ponds. We call them BMPs for best management practice. Water flows in, it's detained there, and we end up having to dredge out a lot of that, a lot of the ponds because they fill with sediment. This is silt. Silt prevents infiltration, which is why we have to dredge them to make sure that everything is draining as it needs to. Also, we have to remove cattails because that layer of roots also can prevent infiltration. So, and I come from a farming family, and I understand water rights are important, but the thing is, if you dredge, you're gonna end up with a lot of loss down into the aquifer, though we do need aquifer recharge because farmers also rely on wells. And then if you also remove willows on the sides, you're gonna end up with a lot of evaporative loss because the banks will be bare and there won't be any more shade provided. So I'm struggling a little bit to understand the farmer's point of view on this, because if we dredge, they'll actually be losing water. If we remove willows, they'll actually be losing water. And in terms of just the transparency, I suppose, with certain figures that have been given, I don't know, are there stream gauges at the end of the refuge?
So,
that are publicly available data?
U.S. Geological Survey.
So USGS has one at the northern end before it enters,
Right.
but not at the south.
But then the mud lake water users measure what water comes out.
So is there a certain like website where we could go and look and see?
I don't know that.
I think
Because otherwise it's kind of
IDWR
like
probably.
an issue with communication between water users and the public, the people who care about the refuge. We like numbers. A lot of us are scientists, right? We really love data.
Thank you.
And I feel like data transparency would probably help. I don't know if maybe you could work through IDWR or IWERI.
They have these figures.
And then I think this, what it's a concern is marrying the two issues of water management, but then also the transfer from federal to state for ownership. And so both of those issues were put into the memorial. And I do have copies, by the way, 20 copies of the memorial. I have 20 copies of the actual watershed, if you want to call it that. It's essentially the aquifer system that draws from 3 different counties, and water management on the Aegean Bench, as well as the high evapotranspiration that's happening in this particular drainage. It's incredibly dry. The soil moisture content right now is so dry that we're losing snowmelt to just the soil, as well as any forest systems. I mean, this is a very complex issue, and the Henry's Fork watershed that Rocky kindly pointed out has been working for 30 years on collaborative water management to kind of resolve these kind of things. And I think that's what we heard from the Friends of Camas, is that there needs to be a good collaborative effort rather than having a memorial to get rid of Camas, and to see if we can't backstop at the, I guess you'd say, the limited staff right now at the refuge. So I'm going to try to take a few more questions. Thank you for the questions. Yeah.
I was just curious, you mentioned that you were assuming that the state, like Fish and Game, would be able to manage the, like what is now the refuge, but did you talk to anybody at Fish and Game?
Yes. And they manage the wildlife on the refuge now.
But they don't manage the water, so what will that cost the state?
It'll cost the state the same thing it will cost the federal government. The difference is we will have people close to us that we can communicate with.
And I have talked to some Fish and Game people as well, who basically see that there's value in having federal and state management, not just single agency management. So there's a difference of opinion there. In the back, and then
Can I ask why you didn't contact the refuge staff or Friends of Camas or the person in charge of managing all the refuges out here before you proposed your bill to work out a solution? Because I find it very, honestly, disrespectful.
okay. The question is basically, why is there not consultation with the agencies prior to your introduction of the bill?
I counseled with the Department of Fish and Game and with water users local in the area, and with Michael Steele, the attorney for the tribes as well.
Okay.
When you say Fish and Game, was it federal or
No.
state?
No.
Idaho Fish and
Idaho
Game.
Fish and Game.
So that clarifies that there wasn't a formal communication then with the federal refuge.
Yeah, so I think I heard a couple of times from the panel, advocating collaboration, communication, and I thought I also heard one suggestion that given the state of change in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's probably not likely that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is going to be a participant in any kind of, I guess I'm inferring, any conversation or communication or collaboration to talk about this issue, maybe identify solutions. So if that's true, then I'm just wondering, you know, what alternatives could there be if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is not in a position to communicate or collaborate or be involved in this, no manager, probably not one coming back, who knows, then what other solution could there be? And that's just an open question. I'm not suggesting that gets debated or discussed now. It just wonder, how could you
I'm going to answer that
different?
question because the Henry's Fork Watershed Council is actually led by the Fremont Madison Irrigation District and the Henry's Fork Foundation, a nonprofit organization, and all the agencies participate as participants rather than as leaders. And I would say the same thing could happen. And by the way, the Henry's Fork Watershed Council is chartered by the Idaho Legislature to give leadership in all water management and water quality issues. And it's been going for 30 years because, number one, it was chartered, but number two, because people found it to be fair to have the irrigators and the nonprofit group co-facilitate and basically model the very behavior that everyone wants to see, more civil dialogue and better transparent communications. And honestly, when you look at the Camas drainage, surface and groundwater, I can't think of a place more in need right now because of the fundamental reduction in water quantity throughout the whole basin. I mean, and you go up to Kilgore with the mine proposed, right, possibly the gold mine. I mean, you're looking at water and other kind of water quality issues up the yin yang. Is that right? But you know, Medicine Lodge Creek is, you know, Birch Creek, all of those are sinks. So there's a groundwater, surface water, you know, conjunctive management is now the law of the land. You can't look at surface water separate from groundwater, and you've simply got to get all the players in the room.
That's true.
And so, you know, the Democrats don't usually facilitate those kind of things. We just love to have forums, right? But we can certainly recommend the Friends of Camas, I would say, to have a true interest in coming together and seeing better communication. So that's a long answer to your question, Doug, but it's been done.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been done, and it just takes people willing to set aside. You don't have to yield your fundamental values in those kind of places. You just have to listen and find common ground, and it is, well, common water, I guess you'd say. Right? So here you go.
Hi.
Thank you, Chance.
Chance Marshall, and I'm the president of the Young Democrats here in Bonneville County. I have a question for you, Senator, and it's just a two-parter. I'm just interested. My biggest concern is the sale of public lands. I do not believe, nor do I stand with the idea of selling public lands to private interests. I believe that's damaging to our environment and a lot of different things. So my question would be, one, does the bill that you introduced that would procure the area that we're talking about to the state, does it distinctly prevent the sale of this to private parties? And two, would you be willing to introduce a bill that would prevent the sale of state lands to private interests?
So this is a transfer.
Yes.
To the state of Idaho. It's not a sale, and we have never had anything to do with any selling of any property. Just a transfer of management.
I understand that, but does the bill say that the state will not sell this land?
No,
to private
It's not law, by the way. It's just a memorial.
Right.
Exactly.
And the second part would be, is there any plans or possibility of introducing a bill that would prevent the sale of state public lands to private interests?
Well, you know that the state does sell land in the Priest Lake area. They're selling lots, and then they're buying endowment, then they're buying endowment land. So
it's against the Idaho Constitution, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
But he just said you are selling public land, but
right.
So
I think they are.
Right, the state land board has the right to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
That's state
Yes,
land, that's
those
going
are
to
in-
state and public land.
But if it became state land, there's the
It
question.
wouldn't be state public land then.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's no intention of selling it.
Right. Okay.
I have a question for Tracy, I think. My name is Tom Hallberg. I work for the Greater Yellowstone Coalition out of our Griggs office, and I have a question, just like thinking about solutions for getting water to water users further in the watershed, and thinking about, like, you know, you mentioned that the stream was incised, and so that's leading to more water loss out of the stream channel, and like the stream probably not connected to its floodplain in the way that it was. Does restoration, or could restoration have an impact that would sort of solve both problems? If there were like money to restore that channel as it goes through the refuge, would there be a potential to sort of change water delivery and have ecological benefits on the refuge?
I'm not a hydrologist, so I'm gonna answer it from a management perspective. I'm not a hydrologist, and I don't specifically know how the water moves from Camas overland to get to Mud Lake. But I do know that channel is now gravel bottom with some silt in it. It's certainly not what it once was. We don't have the overflow that we used to have, because not only is the channel inside, but it's, the dredge spoils are sitting on the side. That's why in places it might only be 8 foot deep, but it's 12 foot high, type of thing. I would surmise that if we could do some restoration in that channel, that we could not lose as much water subbing down in to the ground. I mean, one of the things, you know, Brian worked on this issue for 11 to 12 years. And thinking through that, one of the things that we thought about proposing was to do some work in the stream channel by building it back up. You know, stream restoration, building it back up. But we didn't think it was palatable enough to make it a priority for the GOA funding.
Sure.
So with the GOA funding, you know, we did a lot of work and a lot of analysis about where our water was coming in and where we really needed it. Well, the diversion is miles up, and, you know, we're losing all that water coming down. So you know, part of the GOA funding was to change the diversion, and part of it was to line some of the channels. And the other problem that we had is that some of our well water was pumping into one pond and had to pass through to get to the other one. Well, this one was a better pond for retaining water than that one was. So we were losing water subbing before we ever got it through. So yes, I think restoration would be an answer. I think it would take a lot of work by hydrologists and a lot of buy-in from the downstate, you know, the down water users.
Well, the work that Joe referred to is actually been done by Intermountain Aquatics out of so it's basically Katie Salisbury's project. And so maybe we need to have a follow-up meeting with hydrology of the Mud Lake area. Be fascinating.
Can I ask you a quick question? Have you seen any of that?
Seen any what?
Is that report been shared with?
That report I tried to get before today, I asked
Has that
for.
Report been shared with the Mud Lake water users?
I don't know.
That's a good question, the one from Intermountain Aquatics, right? Yeah. One more question? We'll do one more question and then we'll let people go.
A statement and question. I'm from.
Oh, two more. I'm sorry, there's two more. Can I take her?
Sure.
I told her I would, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Kathy Wells, and this is more of a observation comment based on my experience. I lived in Alaska for 36 years, worked on a lot of land use issues with feds, state, local people. I've not ever known the Army Corps of Engineers to refuse any permit.
Thank you for your observation.
Oh, hey, go ahead and dredge, go ahead and fill.
Yes, thank you.
Again, my name is Ken Olson, and I'm from the state of Texas. I've been here 18 years now. And we have no public lands in Texas. If you want to hunt, you want to do anything, you have to pay somebody at the lease the property to do whatever you want to do. So we have a great gift here in Idaho for having public lands, that you can just go roam around and do whatever you like just about and really enjoy nature. The one thing I would like to ask you about, though, is there was a project that came up, it was worked on the last 2 years and introduced at the federal level, that the whole idea for what is going on with our federal government right now is things that may be working well or somewhat well that just need a little adjustment and stuff. No, the idea is to fire employees, to get rid of stuff so that it looks bad. Then you can point and say, Social Security, whatever, Department of Interior is not functioning well. They're not managing the water out of Camas very well because they only have one employee trying to run around and do the work of 50 people. So now they can sell it to the American people that see these federal agencies aren't working well for you. Now they need to be privatized. Or these agencies, whatever they control, they're not doing it well, so it needs to be turned over to the state. States' rights. Let the state handle it. Okay? Now, you just apparently, cleverly in the state of Idaho, whatever the bill was, if I just heard you say a moment ago, left out a sentence that would solve everybody's problem here if you put in strong language that the state of Idaho will never sell this land without the approval of the people of Idaho. That was left out. That would have solved a lot of problems. What it leaves open is you're the next chain of command that says, okay, now we've been managing it at the state level, but now we've laid off all of our state workers who are taking care of property, so we can tell the public this land doesn't work very well and our agencies don't work very well, and it makes it much more easier to sell to the public that will now, not next year, but 5 years, 10 years from now, that this is a good time to sell this and pay off state debt because our employees. Why could you not put some strong language in the bill saying without the express approval of the citizens of Idaho, we will not sell these lands?
Well,
or are you afraid to do that?
Well, legislature's adjourned.
There's a lot of hypotheticals in there, but I don't know. It wasn't part of what we were working on. We were working on trying to get water through the refuge to the users. That was it.
Right.
There was no other intent.
I think we'll leave it there. So you get the last word. But if you'd like to stick around in the hallway, there may be individuals who want to talk to you, Senator. I would like to thank our panelists.